This is straight talk, leads to straight understanding. Straight talk. STSU. This is straight talk, leads to straight understanding. Straight talk. STSU. This is straight talk, leads to straight understanding. Straight talk.
Welcome. Man, over here I'm on a conference call with some of the hip-hop leaders and intellects on my left there. And over here, we are doing straight wellness. So we're going to start this very soon. And we're going to have some amazing guests tonight. By the way, I'm Sean Bolden, Sean B. In case you didn't know me, subscribe. Yes. I'm talking to everyone. Subscribe, like, comment. Tonight we will be talking about grievance. How do we deal with it? Grievance, how do we deal with it? I'm on location right now because I'm going through some grievance. I'm not at my office today. I'm not at the studio, but I am at my remote location out here in New York. And we will be talking about grievance. So, join us. Come on in, invite people. It will be a definitive, significant call. Tonight we will have Shirma P Clark, a licensed therapist. She's also a good friend and she will be talking with us. We also have a friend of mine, a great friend of mine. Her name is Tessia Woods. And she also will be joining us because she is so articulate in sharing her perspective on grievance. And we will be speaking to her directly, as well as we will be speaking to me directly, who's going through certain things. So join us. Start the live. All right. T, what's up? Can you hear me?
I can hear.
All right. Thank you for joining us. Shirma is about to come on. Gail, I know you can relate to this. We will be talking about grieving. Gail Hilton is a great friend of mine, y'all. And we grew up together, and she happened to have lost her son he was at a very young age, and she was at a very young age as a mother. And I know the grief that she held is pretty significant. Shirma, press can you hear us? I'm going to mute so we don't echo.
Hi.
Hey, so everybody, now let me get this started. This is Straight Wellness. Who just joined us? That is Shirma P Clark. She is a licensed therapist based out of the state of Georgia. Licensed in the state of Georgia, that is my fault. Licensed in the state of Georgia. She is a good friend of mine prior to her being a therapist, and she is here with us. As well, I have Tessia Woods, who is the owner of her own international drink company, Healthy Drinks. She just promoted it, and she is a great friend of mine as well. And we will be discussing here on this stage grievance. And my name is Sean Bolden. In case y'all don't know, Sean Bolden, Sean B, however you know me. And this is Straight Wellness. We do it every Friday from 5:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we do this live. So if you are joining me, I did put in the chats over here. Let's get into it. Tonight's topic is grievance. I will start with the standpoint of we all have grieved. And I'm talking individually and collectively, anybody who's joining us. We have all grieved in one way or another. And how we grieve and how we know how to cope with grieving and or something that makes us grieve has been somewhat challenging. And I don't know if we ever really take the time to explore that. I was having a conversation with my good friend Tessia last week. And, I will let her share how she's grieving and why she's grieving, but it came up in conversation, and it was very interesting because she was able to articulate exactly what she was feeling. So I thought that it would be a great conversation that we all can speak on and hear and be able to have it broaden our perspective. So with that being said, I am now personally doing a funeral tomorrow for my aunt. And so grievance to me has a different type of meaning or a different type of understanding right now because I don't really know. So this conversation is going to be healthy and wealthy for me as well, because I am going into a situation in the morning to where I am uh, organizing the funeral on behalf of our family. And so it's that takes a whole nother stage and step into it. So with that being said, I want you to both introduce yourselves, and I'm going to start with you, Tisha, and then Sharma, you can follow, and then Tisha, you will then take the lead again and share with us about your grieving process. Welcome.
I'm Tessia, the owner, founder of International Players Juice. I also have a photography business, Esther Renee. I live in California for like 11 years now, originally from New Jersey. Graduated from the illustrious Clark Atlanta University, the only university in the Atlanta University Center, which is also historically Black college university. So shout out to the HBCUs.
Tisha, you see me here going like this?
I see you, girl. I see you.
Oh yes. I'm a Panther. Oh
really?
I am. A long time ago. 90.
Oh, I graduated 2008.
Yeah, long time ago.
But you still live here.
But I am Shirma Prescott Clark. I have a master's in professional counseling. I am a licensed professional counselor. I practice in the state of Georgia, but as Sean B said, we go way back. And I guess, I am originally from Port of Spain, Trinidad, lived in Brooklyn, grew up in Miami, went to school in Atlanta at Clark Atlanta undergrad. Lived in California for close to 6 years, so that's where I met Sean B and we became friends. So I've been back in Atlanta Metro now probably 21 years now. But I love Atlanta, but still hard to claim that I'm from Atlanta. I'm from Atlanta, but not from Atlanta, as many of us are. But I did decide to go back after doing about 25 years in another profession. I decided to go back to grad school and get my master's in professional counseling, and then became licensed about 6 years ago. But I still had my undergrad in psychology, so I've kind of still been in the field somewhat before I got into marketing. But that's enough about me. But we have two Clarkites here in this session. So I hear you when I hear you say the only HBCU out there. So I'm on that. So that's enough about me. But I am curious, Tisha, as to know a little bit about what's going on with you and how your process is going. And I have some information, to give on grief, the process of grief, when it's healthy, when it's not healthy, when to get help, when to know that you're going through the normal process, and when to know when it's moving into what we call complicated grief, which is a mental health diagnosis, which people do need support with. So with that, I'd like to know more about kind of what's going on with you and how you've been moving through that. First, I have to do my disclaimer real quick, which I do every show. I'm not here to do therapy. But I have to say that I'm not here to be your therapist, but to basically give my opinion, both professionally and personally. And then, of course, if I feel like someone needs more help, then I encourage them to get more support.
Okay. I'll just say I cannot believe Sean got me to talk about this so fresh, so soon. This was like really random. Next time I will not be having them phone calls with him, when I'm busy doing something else. But 6 months ago, I lost my mom. She passed away, and I don't really know how I'm dealing with grief, to be able to say, yes, this is what it is, this is what it's not. I know that for me, I had to sort of get myself together in order to work, in order to, to make money. As a full-time entrepreneur, my bills and everything, my dog, whatever I need depends on me working. So I never really allowed myself that space off for like a period of time to just sit and say, this This is what I feel, and this is what I give into feeling. There are days where grief just comes in a big wave. I can tell it's happening, like starts in the morning, and it's just like, well, if you got to cry, you got to cry. You don't want to be outside trying to do something and hold it all in, and then later it's going to pop out unexpectedly at when it doesn't need to. So I always tell myself to, whatever you feel, just feel it. Even prior to her passing. But now I think it's more important that I allow myself that time. Like self-care. Yeah, bills have to be paid. Things need to keep going in motion, but if I don't take care of myself, I can't take care of anything else that I have out there. So I had to learn for myself, like, if you're not feeling 100, then don't even give it. Don't push yourself to be something that you can't. Um and I think Sean and I were on the conversation of boundaries. You know, a boundary that I have with people with grieving is, I won't allow you to tell me how to feel or tell me how I feel. Nobody knows the relationship you have with whatever you lost. That's something that you two have, or you, whatever that object is, that's what you have with that. So I think it's very important that you say, okay, this is where I draw the line with you speaking on my feelings. Like, I need to be able to tell you what space I'm in and what I need from you. So that way, this relationship or this friendship that we have isn't severed because you don't necessarily understand what I'm going through. And by doing that, I also, when she first passed away, I remember saying, I'm only allowing myself to talk to people who have experienced this type of loss, because it's like we have something that we can share. You know, they don't have all the answers, but they've been through it, so they can sort of help me go through it. So that's just what I've been doing. Like, I have really bad days. I have days where it's not bad, but it's not good. But I still try to give myself that space to be in that feeling, and then I try not to stay there too long because you can't. You get lost in it, and then you might not ever come out. So that's how I'm dealing with it now. Still kind of new to me though.
Wow. And I want to say this, Shama. In our conversation with Tisha and I, what brought it to my attention of why I want to speak further about it is because um, we never know how someone else is feeling or how someone else is grieving or how someone else is dealing. And it really touched my heart when I was speaking with T, because she was very forthright in that moment when we were speaking about boundaries in reference to what they were. And more importantly, I was very forthright in being open to listen and respect those boundaries. And that was something that's a difficult thing for me as a caring and loving person to a friend of mine to be able to deal with, because I want to be able to help. But the best help that I realized and learned through her expressing those sentiments was to listen and respect what it was that she was saying. And so I wanted to really start the conversation so that people can recognize it. I'm listening, I'm reading in one of the comments I'm about to post it for us, my friend Gail, as you can see, she said, my son passed away in 2012 and my heart grieves for him every day. It's gotten a little better to deal with the reality that he's not here anymore. I get a lump in my throat and tears fall when I think about him. And when I think about my granddaughter, not only not being able to experience his love, I believe I'm brokenhearted for sure. My only child. And then after that, my mom passed away in 2020. And I felt like this wound opening again. And we went to North Carolina to bury her in August and came back 2 weeks later, and my sister passed. And see, I know this of my friend who I grew up with, Gail. And Gail, again, if you want to join us, please do. But these are the things that everybody can't understand always, and might not ever be able to understand. But we need to really have these conversations so that we're able to better cope and better deal with each other during these times. Sharma, your thoughts?
Whew. Lots of thoughts, but I want to just make some comments on what Tisha discussed. And I think Sean B, you know this. I lost my stepmom in July, and then I lost a man who was like a father to me a week later, that I met in LA. And he was probably closer to me. I love my dad, but he was almost closer to me than my dad was. And so that was like a huge loss for me. Um, Grieving is part of our humanity, and it's something that we can't avoid because we're going to lose people. And sometimes I think the biggest loss is a death, but then people experience the same losses when they have divorce. Um, they go through the same type of emotions because a loss is a loss, but some losses are bigger than others. Tisha, I want to commend you. First of all, I'm sorry for your loss. I'm sorry that you lost your mom. I can't imagine, because when you have a good relationship with your mother, or that's one of the closest relationships you can ever have in life outside of your own child, outside of being a parent yourself. And I can't imagine the depth of losing your mom. So my condolences, and I'm sorry to hear that you lost your mom. I've heard some healthy things from you, so I want to acknowledge some of the things that I heard you say, that make me feel and know that you are on a healthy path to, you know, balancing some of your grief. Um, when I heard you say, if you want to cry, you cry. So you are allowing yourself to feel the brunt and the depth of the loss. And sometimes people are afraid to go that deep. They're afraid to feel that level of pain, loss, grief, but you are allowing yourself to do that. I like that you have set boundaries for yourself in regards to what you allow people to say, not say to you, because if you're in a space to receive it, you receive it. But if you're not, then I like that you're letting people know, hey, this is not healthy for me. This doesn't work for me. This doesn't help me. I do want to ask you, how much time did you take off after your mom passed?
Mm. So for the funeral, I was like the planning. I was the estate and power of attorney. So I was there, but I wasn't necessarily in it. I had my cousin with me, and she did a lot of the verbal work. Like, okay, this is the dress she should wear, but my cousin went through the whole process of picking it out, whatever, whatever. I think once I came back to California, I was maybe off for like 2 weeks.
Okay.
And I feel like I know that wasn't enough time. Because I I'm starting to come to a point where I'm looking back on things and I'm just like, I wish I could experience that moment. Like sitting in the funeral, looking at her body there, being present in that moment. I feel like it was a shell of who I was. So I'm having to work through these emotions while trying to still be back in the real world. And I feel like I think I didn't give myself enough time with that. So like 2 weeks for sure.
Okay. And I feel like 2 weeks is not enough, but at the same time, when people have to work,
Mm-hmm.
actually, you saying 2 weeks made me more comfortable, because I was concerned that you might have said 3 days or 4 days, which people have done as well.
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks is never enough, but 2 weeks is a healthy amount of time to take. Um, but the process in and of itself is going to be months long, and you're 6 months in, and 6 months is a fair amount of time, but it's, of course, it's not enough time to go through your whole process. What I can tell you is this: one of the things that I've learned, um, is when you are the point person or go-to person for the funeral, for the arrangements, for the estate, for anything that has to do with your loved one. It complicates the situation. Because what happens is you go into business mode.
Mhm.
And when you go into business mode, you're detaching from the actual situation and you're attaching from your emotions because you have to get to the busy work of doing what's necessary to help that loved one. And it delays your ability to grieve because you don't have time to grieve. You have to detach and do the work. Um, I stood in for my, just to self disclose and be more personal. I chose to fly back to Miami and be the point person for my father because I knew that it would be too overwhelming for him to try to plan a funeral and deal with the estate. My sister dealt with the estate and I helped with the funeral arrangements. But that gave my dad the ability to really feel the loss
Mhm.
and attach to the loss. Because what happens is now that you're in California and you're back, once you settle down, then you settle into the loss.
Yeah.
And so when people do that, it delays their ability to process. So then everyone else is grieving when they hear about the death. When they're at the funeral, they have the opportunity to see it, feel it fully, talk about it, be supported. And when you have to help with the business of it, you don't get to do that. And then you're back home and you're by yourself. And then you start feeling the brunt of it. So, my advice to anyone whose loved one passes, if that person is close to you, like a mom, a dad, a spouse, a significant other, or a child, or someone very close to you, allow someone else to be that point person for you if you can. If you can have support, and I'm glad that your cousin supported you, but if someone can take that from you, allow them to do that because you need to be able to settle in and accept the loss and grieve the loss. Um, but again, a lot of the things that you've done, especially focusing on self care, has been healthy, is healthy for you. The fact that you're saying that when you have bad days, you allow yourself that time to have the day and you sit with yourself. And absolutely what you said is it coming in waves. That is something that I tell my clients all the time. Grief comes in waves and it ebbs and flows. So you're going to have good days. You're going to have great days. You're going to think about your mom. You're going to think about all the good memories. You'll smile some, you'll laugh some, and then you'll have days where you're like, I thought I was getting better. And you just have a horrible day. But anyone that's grieving, just know that the grief comes in waves and allow yourself to feel it. It could be 2 years from now, and you're going to have moments depending on when her birthday, holidays, something may remind you of something that you guys did together, and you'll feel it fully. So you've said some really healthy things, and I just want people to know, what things are healthy, and many of the things that you said are. The one thing that for the person who talked about the loss of a child, you never get over the loss. Tisha, you will never get over the loss of your mom. To the person that wrote in, you will never get over the loss of your child. You don't get over it, but you learn to live with it. And that's the key. Learning to accept it and learning to live with it is key. But if you expect yourself to get over it, it's just not going to happen. What concerns, or do you have any concerns or questions about any of your process that you're going through right now?
I don't think I have any questions. I just didn't know if the way I was handling it, was the way to go about it. Outside of like talking to a therapist, what resources can I utilize that are right around me, or what do I have within myself to try to manage this, so that it doesn't become a stress factor.
Okay.
So
So what,
go ahead.
so when we become concerned as therapists, when we become concerned, there's a couple of things that I look for. I look for, are you allowing yourself to feel the loss? It looks different for everyone. Everyone experiences loss differently. Everyone grieves differently. So are you allowing yourself to accept the loss, feel the loss? That's the first thing. The second thing is it getting better? It doesn't mean you're going to have the best days, and it doesn't mean that you're not going to have bad days, because you're going to have good days. And again, as I said, you said it beautifully, that it comes in waves, because that's what it does. And you're going to have days where you feel good, and you'll have days that you feel the loss and it's hurtful and it's painful, and you go back to that place where you're grieving again. The question becomes, is it coming fewer and further between? And is it getting better? So as long as you see that it's getting better, meaning sometimes people can't get out of bed the first, week or so. Sometimes people can't go to work. Sometimes people, don't have an appetite. Sometimes people are feeling a really intense sense of loss. Are those things getting better? And so that's what you look for. Better looks different for everyone also. So as long as you're seeing some improvement in the depth of the loss and improvement as far as like how you're engaging, are you taking care of yourself again? Are you eating properly? Are you talking about it? Are you going back to work? If you're seeing improvement, then you're going through your natural process. What is complicated grief? And complicated grief is a actual new diagnosis, because people have been feeling complicated grief for years. But our mental health book that we use to diagnose people, it wasn't part of that. And now it is part of it. And it's called complicated grief. Complicated grief occurs when it's been a year or more and you're not seeing any improvement, or you're getting worse. And there are people who get worse, and there are people who don't improve. And so when someone gets to that point, I would say absolutely they need to get support outside of themselves. At that point, they need to see a therapist, and they need to get additional support. And people go through different things. Before I get into like stages of grief, I want to see if you have any other comments or questions, or Sean B, if you have any comments or questions before I like get into kind of what grief looks like. Your mom is back there. Mom's behind you.
I know.
Hey, Mom.
Hi. Oh, I forgot. You can see me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we can see you.
Welcome to live television.
Oh yeah, for sure. For sure. People's kids come in. See, I lock my door because I don't want anybody walking in the room.
Man.
But before I get into kind of, and if anyone else is out there and they have questions or concerns for me before I get into like stages of grief and what that looks like, let me know. But I wanted to see if Tessia had any other comments, or if you had any other comments before I get into kind of like stages of grief and that sort of thing.
Yeah, actually, go ahead, T. Go ahead.
Any other, like I said, this is really new to me. Like work has honestly put me in a space where I have to deal with the grief. Like, I cannot set it to the side because I have to be out here. I have to be visible. I have to be present. So I got to deal with it. But if I got some questions, don't worry, I'm gonna hit you up.
Okay. And Tessia, I'm glad you said that you have to, because here's the thing. It's either going to hit you now or it's going to hit you later. Mm-hmm. It's not going to hit you. It's not going to affect you. It's either going to affect you. People sometimes think that they can run from it, detach from it, bury it, stuff it. You can do that. It's still going to hit you at some point. So better to deal with it now and get support if you need support dealing with it, or somewhere later on, your life unravels later, because the grief is still in there. And if it's not dealt with, it will show up in different ways and affect your life. It can affect your relationships. It can affect your work life. It can affect your emotional and mental health. It could affect your physical health. So it's still going to affect you if you bury it and not allow yourself to feel that grieving process.
So there are times where I tell my friends that still have their mothers, I get jealous to hear of their conversations, to hear, like, it bothers me. And it's not to wish bad, it's not to even go down that path. It's just to say, I don't have that. So right now I don't want to hear you with it. Is that normal?
It is normal. And when I go through the stages of grief, that's the second stage.
Okay.
So you are now in the second stage, which is anger. And so I'll talk about all the stages. Yes, it is normal. Where it becomes abnormal is if you never get yourself to a place where you can accept the relationship of others. Does it mean that you still won't feel, as they say, some kind of way? You will at times still miss that attachment. And instead of being jealous, you'll look at it and it might be more of a longing, like, wow, must be nice to still have that. I really wish I did, but not the intense emotion or anger behind the fact that they still have it and you don't. But yes, that is normal. That is absolutely normal. It's only been 6 months for you, so yes, that's a normal stage. I see Gail saying that she had to get herself together because she was beginning to feel depressed all the time. Yes, that is also a stage. And when you get to a year, past a year, and you're feeling intense sadness and intense depression, I would say that is when you need to reach out to a therapist and get more support. But depression and sadness is definitely part of the grieving process. So Sean, before I go through like the stages of grief, do you have any questions or comments?
Absolutely. As you can see, the comment that I tagged was you go, or that I said was, you go into business mode. I am going through, my aunt's passing, and it is a complicated one for a lot of different reasons. But I am also the organizer of the funeral, and people have been asking me, "How do you feel?" And my mother, I told her the other day, because she went with me for the first time to kind of go through the circumstances. I've been dealing with this since September 10th when she passed, and it's now October 22nd. And I've been trying to really go through the nuances that the complicated situation has provided. And yesterday when my mother, or 2 days ago when my mother asked me, and my lady asked me, a lot of people asked me, "Yo, how are you feeling?" Initially, I could not give an answer because I said, it reminds me of when I was working. They asked me, how you feel? And I said, you know what? No, they were saying, "I'm so proud of you. I like what you're doing. And you're standing strong and all of these things." And I was like, well, to me, it's kind of like when when I'm working and I'm on the road with, I just had to put out fires. I had to be prepared for uh, whatever came my way, and I just had to, there was a lot of complications. I had to go to courts. I had to go to legal places, jails. I had to go to a lot of different places during this process, and there were some obstacles that I was facing for different reasons. And like, "Yo, how you been dealing with this?" I said, well, it's kind of like if I'm on the road and I'm dealing with an artist, there's so many nuances that come, but they've never seen me in that mode. So to me, again, it was business mode. That's what I was in. I'm still in business mode until tomorrow. It's funny, I was talking about the funeral today, and I was speaking to the pastor who's going to be speaking, and I said, "Yeah, I'm about to send you the program. It has the run of show." And I said, "Pardon me, I'm in, I'm in the entertainment industry, so I know it's not a show that I'm doing, but that's kind of how I relayed it." I was like, "Yo, I'm about to send you over to run a show," because it's kind of, in going through there, it was the lineup. All right, what do we do? This is the prayer, the songs, so on and so forth, that I was going through during the first course of the day. And I know I had to share it with him so he knew what role and what he needed to do from the direction that we as the family was going to give him. And after this call, I'm going to talk to him about that. But when I said it to him, which was right before the call, I'm about to forward you over the run of show is what came out of my mind. I don't know if it came out of my mouth because I'm, again, still in business mode. So I haven't even had time to really process how I feel or how I'm going to grieve. And so in going back to work, they're like, yo, you all right? And I, because they were alerted in September. It's October. I'm about to do the services late in October. So it's almost a month and a half while we're laying out to rest. And so they're thinking, okay, everything's going to be all right. But I'm thinking, I don't know how it's going to be. I'm really concerned with how it's going to be once I do get the time to stop and try and decompress. Because there's not only things that have been going on in that space or place, but there's also things that's been going on in my personal life and place, and things that have been going on in my professional life and place that I really haven't had time to get in business mode or getting to feeling what it is. So I'm now here trying to figure that out. And that's why it was a great time, I think, to have this conversation so that I might be able to get some tools on preparing from Tessia and you and throughout the exchange that you guys are going to have. Yes,
I saw Tessia shake her head, and I'm glad that she did. There is no preparing. There's no preparing for it. It's going to be different for you than it was for Tessia. It's going to be different for you than it was for me. And I can tell you, Sean, that, my grandmother died now, I think 11 years ago. And I was very close to my grandmother. When my parents moved to the United States, I was left with my grandmother. So she was a second mom to me. And then when I came to the U.S., my parents went back and got her. We went back and got her a couple of years later. When she died, I was a hospice liaison. So I was the person that used to talk to people about hospice and what that looks like and what you do and what to expect. And I was the one that had to take over that when I got to Miami, and my grandmother looked like she wasn't going to survive. And so I was busy getting information from the doctor so that I can help my mom make a determination about what should we do, what should we not do? Should we keep fighting? Should we continue on antibiotics? Do we let her go? And to make a long story short, it just got to the point where I knew that it wasn't going to be turned around. She wasn't going to get better. And, talk to my mom, who is the medical point person, about what it looked like to allow her to pass. But there was a lot of bickering and disagreements and differences of opinions in my family. And I have a really big family. I have a big family on both sides. And so there were a lot of people who had opinions and comments. And so they were arguing and all this other stuff. I'm busy managing arguments, looking at people, trying to be the peacemaker, which I am in the family. I'm always trying to get people to talk and work it out. And then I didn't realize, because I wasn't, I was very into self-help and all that, but I wasn't a therapist. But I did realize when I got home that I never got a chance to grieve. And even during the funeral, I didn't get a chance to grieve. And I don't think it hit me till 6 months later. I don't know that it hit me that my grandmother was gone and really allowed myself to feel the brunt of it until about 6 months after she passed, when everything settled down and I went back to my life. So what does it look like for you? What you're doing right now is called compartmentalizing things. And to compartmentalize is basically put it in spaces. You're putting it in spaces, in boxes. And that's what you have to do in order to function. In order to get up every day and go on with your life, you have to take your feelings and compartmentalize it in order to be able to focus on the business of planning a funeral. You can't grieve and plan a funeral because you can't fall apart. And so what is it going to look like? I don't know, because it looks different for all of us. But what I will say is, whatever comes up, allow yourself to feel it and experience it, and sit in it and get support when you need support. People try to run from it. Like I said, it still catches up. You're either going to feel it now or you feel it later. So whatever it looks like for you, when it comes up, just let yourself experience it. And so stages of grief. The first stage, and everyone doesn't necessarily go through the stages the same way or at the same time. Sometimes it may look like anger for Tessia. For somebody else, they may have the denial stage. So everyone goes through different stages at different time, but most of us go through the same stages of grief. That's what we all have in common. But the way we deal with the stage also looks different. So the first stage of grief is denial. It's kind of like when you get that phone call. You know, your loved one is dead. Your friend is dead. Your spouse is dead. The first thing is, oh, no. Not my loved one. That didn't happen. You know, I've called people and had to call people and say someone's dead. And the first thing I got was, you're a liar. Nope, they're not dead. Don't call me, tell her, no. Don't call me telling me that. It's not true. It didn't happen. So denial is the first stage. And what denial looks like is avoidance, where people don't even want to hear it. I don't want to talk about it. Don't tell me that. I'm not dealing with it. Procrastination. For some people, it can be procrastination in like addressing the business of it. That's why it's good to have someone else that could step in and do it for you. Forgetting things, getting distracted, doing things mindlessly, like you're just kind of going through the motions of things, but you're really not thinking through it, can't attach to it, don't remember what's going on. What I've noticed, and I have a client that's kind of doing this right now, is busying themselves. So you have a lot of people that stay busy. I'm going to stay busy. I'm going to stay busy. I'm going to be so busy. I'm not going to let myself feel anything. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do this. I'm going to go out. I'm going to be with my friends. Just a lot of busying themselves so that they don't feel it. But guess what? You can't stay busy all the time. Again, if you don't feel it now, you feel it later. So the busying yourself just delays the grief because you're going to feel it. At some point, you're going to sit down. And when you do, the brunt of it is going to hit you. So thinking and saying, I'm fine. I'm good. It's fine. It's cool. I'm all right. So all that is part of denial. What denial feels like is shock, feeling numb. There are people who can't even feel it initially. They're just numb. Confusion. I don't know what just happened. I don't know how this happened. I don't know what just happened. Confusion. And then shutting down. So a lot of people are not verbal and they shut down. So they internalize, and if they shut down, they don't talk about it. They don't want you to talk about it. They don't want anything said about it. So that's the first stage, denial. And again, people go through, sometimes they may skip a stage or it doesn't necessarily come in that order. I'm just going through the stages. So yeah, the second stage, I see someone, oh, that's you. You're putting stuff up. So the second stage is anger. So Tessia mentioned jealousy, and jealousy is kind of part of anger. So her being jealous of seeing people, her girlfriends and other people who still have their moms and are still close and still have that relationship. So that is totally normal that she's going through that jealousy, because that's part of being angry about how can, and people are mad at God sometimes, or they're mad at the system, or they're mad at the hospital, or they're mad at themselves, or they're just mad. They're angry. How could this happen? So it looks like pessimism. It looks like being cynical, being sarcastic, being aggressive, where they're just going off on everybody. They're cussing everyone out because they can't deal with their emotions. So their emotions end up looking aggressive. And so they're angry and they're aggressive, or being passive aggressive. If they're not aggressive, being really passive aggressive with people. How you doing? How the fuck you think I'm doing? How would you be doing? You know what I mean? Just angry and passive aggressive.
Can I just wait 1 second?
Go ahead.
I think that "how are you doing" question is so loaded. I wish we could identify other ways to ask people how they are or how they're coping, because on one hand, it's like, how do you think I'm doing? You
Right.
know, like, that's what you think going on over here. But on the other hand, they don't really know what to say. They don't know how to say it. So Yeah, that's it. All right.
So, Tisha, thank you for that, because people, you're right. People, they mean well, but they don't know what to say. And I was going to get into some of that. Tell me what you feel like you needed to hear in that moment.
Is there anything I can do for you right now? You know, is there any way I can help you in whatever you're feeling without me having to vocalize it? Because I think the how are you doing is such an obvious answer. You obviously know that something isn't right. So you obviously know I'm not doing good. But yeah. Like
And
ask
that's good.
ask
That's
how they
good for people to hear. Good, good. And I'm glad you said that, because you're right. People don't know what to say. And so you saying what you needed also helps them know what someone else might need. Absolutely. And the other thing that's loaded that a lot of people do. Oh my gosh, here we go. Especially us folks, especially black folks. Especially black folks, but white people do it too. Other cultures do it too. But that thing where everything happens for a reason is loaded. Everything happens for a reason. When you say, well, everything happens for a reason, or we love them, but God loved them best. You know, that those kind of things, people mean well, but those are really triggering and dismissive kind of statements. And whereas you feel like you're being helpful, when you say that to someone who is in the middle of grief, it is not helpful to them at all. You know, well, God, you know, now God has an angel, you know, all these things. It's not helpful because it's not helping them with the loss. Their person is gone. God loves them best. So what are you trying to say? I don't love them. I didn't love them. Or God knew what he was doing, or whatever. Those kinds of things where people mean well is triggering for people. And when they're in that, especially the beginning stage, it's not helpful. It causes people to become angry or feel dismissed, or causes them to shut down, or, and so it makes it harder for them to share with you what they're really feeling, because they feel that there's no way that you're going to understand what I'm feeling right now. Okay. And Gail said that rubbing your back was a trigger for her. Really didn't know what I wanted to hear. Yeah. And people try, I mean, they mean well, but a lot of times some of the things they do, they're inadvertently not helpful at all. And so asking people, as Tisha said, what can I do for you, or what do you need? That's helpful. Someone may say, I need a hug, and then you give them a hug. Some people don't want you to touch them. And so saying, what do you need is a good way to support them, because they can tell you what they need, because again, grief looks different for everyone. So again, with anger, sometimes people get into physical fights and arguments with their loved ones or other people because they're grieving and they don't know how to deal with it. And then alcohol and drug use, they want to numb it. So it's dangerous for people who already have addiction issues. That can really cause them to go down that road, or people who are in recovery. Sometimes it causes them to relapse, but just normal people will start drinking more or using drugs in order to numb and not feel that brunt of the loss. What anger feels like is frustration, impatience, resentment, embarrassment, rage, out of control. And I would say in Tisha's case, jealousy, when she mentioned feeling jealous about other people who still had, their mom. So the third stage of grief is bargaining, what we call bargaining. And what bargaining looks like is, what we call ruminating. And when you start having like looping thoughts about the future or the past, thinking about, wow, mom's not going to be here for my wedding, or dad's not going to be here, when my child graduates from college. And mind you, again, as I said, these are the normal stages of grief. When it's abnormal is when it stays over a year and you're staying stuck in the same space, or you're getting worse. So kind of thinking about the past constantly, what you did with that person, the memories that you shared, or future things that they're going to miss. Overthinking maybe if I would have done this, it wouldn't have happened, or maybe if someone done that, it wouldn't have happened. Comparing yourself to others. Tisha, you gave that good example. Comparing yourself to others. Your friends having their moms and you not. Normal stage. Predicting the future or assuming the worst. Also, I'm not going to be able to live without this person. Assuming the worst. What happens to me now? I can't financially take care of myself now that my husband's dead. Perfectionism is also part of bargaining. Wanting to be better, perfect. Thinking I should have done this, or if only I would have done that. And judging yourself about how you're handling your grief, or how you're handling the process, or judging how others are handling their grief or handling the process. Like, oh God, she's been crying every single day, or she's just overdoing it. Nobody really feels that way. That's fake. So when you start judging people through the process, and what it looks like is guilt, shame, blame, fear and anxiety, and insecurities. So the fourth stage of grief is depression. So I heard someone else mention that they had fallen into depression. Having depression after a loss is normal. It's really how long. You have to monitor how deep the depression goes, how it's affecting your life, and how long the depression starts lasting. So what depression looks like is kind of losing your not being able to eat or sleep well. Reduce, like not having a lot of energy to do things. You just don't want to do anything. People may sleep a lot, or just sit around and watch TV all day, or play video games all day. They don't have a desire or a will to do a lot. They don't have an interest in hanging out anymore. They don't want to go out with their friends. They don't want to do things that they used to do, social things, or entertainment. They have a reduced motivation level. They just don't feel like doing much. Crying a lot is also part of depression, and also increase in drug and alcohol use. So those things are normal parts of depression, but when they start to increase or last for a prolonged amount of time, then it's a problem. What depression feels like is intense sadness, despair, feeling helpless or hopeless, being disappointed a lot, and also feeling overwhelmed. And then the last stage of grief is acceptance. And acceptance doesn't mean that you don't miss your loved one anymore. It doesn't mean that you don't feel the loss anymore. It doesn't feel that you don't grieve anymore. It just kind of means that you're starting to plug back into your life. You're starting to pay attention to yourself again. You're starting to do things. Some things are starting to go back to some sense of normalcy. So that is acceptance. And what acceptance looks like is being conscious of your behavior, like mindful of your behaviors, engaging with reality, not wishing something would be different, but accepting the reality of what it is right now that your loved one is gone, being present in the moment. So you're not caught up in past or future things anymore. You are present in the moment. You're living your life. You are being focused on kind of what you're doing and what are the things that you need to do for yourself again. Being able to be vulnerable with your emotions. I feel like Tisha's been doing a great job with that, Sean. Sharing with you what she's actually feeling. So being able to tell someone, hey, I'm having a pretty good day. I'm having a really bad day. I feel really sad today. I'm thinking about my loved one a lot. I'm kind of feeling that sadness again. So being able to not only express your emotions, but being able to sit with your emotion, being able to feel the sadness, feel that wave of sadness, grief, despair, and ride it. Because guess what? It's a wave. It will pass. It ebbs and flows. So you go up and you have a bad day, you'll come back down and it won't be so bad. So just allowing yourself to be vulnerable and be able to sit in your grief and your sadness. Also being not defensive when people talk to you, that's part of acceptance, not being as defensive, but also being assertive, like being able to tell someone what you need and what works for you. That's not helpful to me, but let me tell you what is helpful. Like Tessia said, if someone just would have asked her, what do you need? That's being assertive, saying, hey, it would be better if you just let me know, ask me what I need, but don't tell me these other things that are not helpful to me. And then also accepting is being able to cope and, have healthy responses to people. What acceptance feels like is it being things being good enough, you being courageous, validation is acceptance, being compassionate of yourself. And what compassion looks like to me is not forcing yourself to be where you're not. This is where I am today, and I'm having a horrible day. And, a week later, I'm doing okay. But having that self-compassion where you allow yourself to be wherever you are any given day or any given week. So pride and wisdom is also part of acceptance. Taking pride in the relationship that you had, even if it had some flaws, and then really having some wisdom about what the relationship was and wasn't, and how to move forward with it. And again, people skip stages. People sometimes go through stages at different times. They don't actually always come one after the other. And sometimes you move through stages. Tessia, you may be in an accepting mode, in 6 months down the line where you are, you may be more accepting. And then a month later, you may not. You may go through a stage where you're like, you know what? It's not fair that my mom is gone. So I say, if you see that, just have compassion for yourself and know that you'll go through different stages. You go through them at different times. You may feel like you've worked through a stage, and sometimes you may be right back to the sadness or the denial. And so just having self-compassion is a big part of this, and something that all of us need to have. So complicated. I do. Okay. So before I get into complicated grief, any questions, comments?
Absolutely. I wanted to touch on this one, which was a very touching one. I talk about them at times just to say their name. I have no one calling me mommy anymore, nor can I call mommy to my mom, and that's heartbreaking. Gail, wow. I, again, can never or don't have that feeling. And I knew that you will be able to understand this topic probably deeper than any one of us, if not the same as many have who has experienced what you have, but I haven't. And so being able to get these pointers on how to deal with that with you or with anyone who is dealing with that is part of why I wanted to have this conversation. Tessia has been, as Shirma said, very gracious in being able to share her feelings with me privately. And I'm thanking her as well directly for sharing her feelings with us publicly, because it is helpful. You've made a lot of points that you made over our private conversation that you reiterated tonight in our public that you were dealing with. And what Shirma just said, that assertiveness and being able to say it clearly and concisely on how you feel is a great sign of you being able to ultimately get the support and or get through those trying and hard times that you'll be challenged with in the future, as well as that you've been already challenged with. So I just thank you for your candidness. Yeah, that's the word, I think. You being candid with us. And it's very helpful for, as I said, me walking into a place of, and thank you, Shirma, for sharing with me what it was like, or what it means when you initially said that when I said I'm working and I decompartment. What was the word? Decompart.
Compartmentalizing things.
Yeah, that
Compartmentalizing. Putting them
that
in
word she
compartments.
said. Yeah, right. That
Yes.
word. I do that pretty
Compartmentalizing.
well. Not
Yeah.
only in grieving, I do that pretty well when I'm in business.
Well,
Because
people
I
that
guess
do that do it with everything. And they're very good at doing it when they don't want to deal with their emotions or when they can't deal with their emotions. And so that's
we
a way
talking
of
about.
not falling apart.
We talking about.
Compartmentalizing is a way to not fall apart. And so,
We talking about grieving tonight, not about
no, but
our emotions.
that's what I'm talking about. People who compartmentalize things tend to do it with everything. And so when grief is such an intense emotion that if you're one who compartmentalizes things and puts them in compartments, that's what you'll go that's what you'll go to because that's what you do. And so that keeps you stable. It's not a bad thing. It's only a bad thing when you never go back and allow yourself to address it or deal with the emotion. But it can
Well,
be a healthy way of getting through things without, falling apart, honestly.
well, that's interesting you say that because it's so normal to me that like my mother first got to witness it in me. I told you some other friends of mine just got to witness it in me, and I'm looking at them crazy because they're like, "Wow, you're doing this," and I'm like, "That's what I do," because they haven't been around me doing that. And but to your point, what concerns me about that within me is that I do put it in other areas that possibly I should be able to express or uh, show the emotions that I am putting away in those compartments.
Yeah,
And
being
so,
vulnerable.
yeah, vulnerable. And so, you're right. Sometimes I am. It just looks like I have no feelings because I guess I'm compartmentalizing. Yeah, something like that. My emotions, and I do it so well that it is I sometimes just look very intense. I look like I'm not emotional, like I don't have feelings, and sometimes in my vulnerability, I'm sharing with y'all now, that hurts my feelings when people think that way of me, to where I'm not able to. I am being vulnerable. I just don't know how to show it in a manner that they're used to seeing
Well, that's another topic.
it.
I'll just say
Absolutely.
you're not being vulnerable, you're detaching. You feel it inside, but you're not allowing yourself to be vulnerable because people can't see it. So,
Okay.
but,
Well, let's
but
go into the other
so
stages.
that's a different topic. Another topic, another day.
Topic.
But
Yeah.
I would like
Continue.
to thank Gail Hilton for being so vulnerable because I cannot imagine. I'm a mom myself, and I can't imagine losing a child. I can't imagine it. And so the level of grief of losing your child and losing your mom is unimaginable. Um, I would say I don't know how long, Gail, you've been experiencing that, but I will say, based on the things that we're discussing, if you feel that you are at the same level and it's not getting better for you or it is getting worse, I encourage you to go get some support and seek counseling. So complicated grief, as I said before, everyone goes through the stages of grief. It is normal to feel grief. It is normal to cry. It's normal to feel depression, anger, sadness, despair, all the things that we just discuss as far as the stages of grief goes into acceptance. If you're not getting to the acceptance stage, that's not healthy. Um, if you've been grieving for over a year and it's not getting better, that's not healthy. So we call that complicated grief, and people do experience complicated grief. Um, I do a lot of therapy with adolescents, and I had a 14-year-old whose within a 3-month period, her dad died of COVID. Her dad went out of the country to help her grandfather. While her dad was out of the country, granddad had COVID, died. Dad got COVID from granddad, died. And then her grandfather, who lived with her in the house 2 months later, died. And this is a 14-year-old child. And no one really, she never talked about it. She never cried. She never discussed it. She never talked about it. What happened was she started to fail all of her classes. And so they called me to see her at school. And so I started seeing her, and through kind of, her mother said she just won't talk about it. She won't talk about dad. She won't talk about granddad, neither one of them. She just would not discuss it. So through the process of helping her work through her grief, the first thing that I did was just to get her to talk about her dad. Not the loss of her dad, just her dad. What did they do together? What did she like? What were some great memories she had? But I would say about 6 months in, she started doing a lot better, and she started engaging more in her life. She started being with her friends more. She actually cried. Like, I remember she came back that Monday to school and she said, I cried over the weekend. And where people may get scared, oh my God, she's crying. I thought that was a great thing that she cried, because she allowed herself to finally start feeling the emotions, because she just went numb. And the fact that she was feeling her emotions let me know now she can start healing. She is crying. She's talking about dad. She's talking about the loss of a granddad and the things that reminded her. She was saying, I smelled this smell and it reminded me of my granddad. Someone made this sandwich for me. It's the sandwich my dad always made. So she started being able to attach her grief to, fond memories, and allow herself to feel the loss and kind of start working through the process. I don't see her anymore because I'm not at the school anymore, but I felt like she was moving into a good place where she was accepting it, but also allowing herself to feel both the loss and the love at the same time. But the complicated grief, symptoms of complicated grief is intense sorrow, not normal sorrow, but like intense sorrow where you're still feeling that intense sorrow after a year or so, pain, what we call rumination, which is just having these thoughts over and over and over again, kind of like some of the same thoughts about your loved one and the loss, where you're not focusing on yourself or taking care of yourself or what your needs are, but your main focus is just on the death of your loved one or the loss itself. Focusing excessively of things that remind you of your loved one, or either excessively focusing on your loved one or avoiding anything that has to do with your loved one. Like, don't say that person's name. Don't talk to me about them. I don't want to discuss it, look at it, hear about it, kind of like the whole avoidance. So people either go to the extreme where they're avoiding it completely, or they just can't stop talking about it. And that's all they ever talk about. And they won't focus on the present or what they need to do for themselves right now. And they're just focused on that loss. Having issues still accepting the death, that the person is gone. A big thing is numbness. The student that I had, that's what she was in initially, just being numb, not letting herself feel any of it. After a year, you should have felt something. You should have felt some level of grief, anger, loss, something. And so being numb is an unhealthy way of dealing with it. Feeling bitter still a year later about the loss. Bitter. You can't be bitter a year later and be accepting. It just doesn't go hand in hand. Feeling that your life has no meaning, not trusting other people, the inability to feel joy again. Some people, when they lose someone close to them, they're like, I'm never going to be happy again. Well, it's normal to feel that way in the beginning. It's not normal to feel that way, a year or so later. Also within complicated grief is, and this falls into depression too, having trouble like doing your normal routines, going to work, caring for yourself, cooking, running errands, those sort of things, isolating and withdrawing from others, not wanting to be around people, not wanting to do things still, kind of isolating and not socializing and not being a part of your own life anymore. Deep depression, deep sadness, guilt and shame, believing that you did something wrong, that you had something to do with the death or you could have prevented it somehow. Feeling like life isn't worth living, like you don't want to live your life anymore. It's not worth anything. It has no meaning. Some people have what they call, depending on how someone died, they experience what we call survivor's guilt, where it's why them and not me. And I would say especially people who lose children, and sometimes when someone's spouse or significant other dies, they go through that why them and not me type of thing, especially people who lose children. So when it's time to see someone is if it's been a year or more and you're still feeling any of these intense emotions. There are self-help groups out there. There's groups out there that you can go to that are grief support groups. If you're still feeling like you need additional support, there are grief groups out there, grief support groups. Sometimes when people have intense losses, they feel suicidal in the beginning. And if people are still feeling suicidal or struggling with that because of the loss later on, they definitely need to get help for that as well. So I always give, suicide prevention line, which is 1-800-273-8255. And in the state of Georgia, we have the Georgia Crisis and Access line that people can call to and talk to someone if they're feeling.
Repeat the suicide line again.
1-800-273-8255. And those are trained professionals that can just help talk you through some of your situations until you can get, help from a therapist.
Okay. Well, here's what we're going to do. I want to first and foremost thank you both for coming on.
Before we go off, Sean, let me just give some preventative tips.
Okay.
And then we can close out.
Absolutely.
Because complicated grief, it's depression, suicidal thoughts, anxiety, including PTSD, depending on how the person died, difficulty sleeping, increased risk of like physical illness, which includes like heart disease, high blood pressure, where they start feeling physical illness because of it, long-term trouble with getting back to daily living or having difficulty with your relationships and activities, and then also increase in alcohol addiction, nicotine addiction, or drug addiction, or abuse, like increase of drug use or alcohol use. What helps is talking about it. Tessia, thank you again for being willing to talk to Sean B and talk about it live with us. So talking to others who
I was set up.
You said he has a good way of doing that. So talking to others is important. Talking to people who can support you and people who understand. Finding support from family members, friends, social support groups, people in the community, church members, your clergy, or self-help groups, and then also bereavement counseling. It's okay to do counseling early on if you feel like you need support, but I would say if it's been a year and you're still going through some intense emotions, it is absolutely essential that you reach out and get support outside of your friends and family if that has not been enough to help you move into a more balanced place. Seek professional help. And so that's it.
She says, thank you. This is actually the first time I've really said what's laying on my heart. And I know I'm still healing. And what's interesting about you saying that, Gail, is as well, what Shirma just said is that speaking about it is part of that therapeutic process that I think is helpful. And I'm thankful for you being able to share with us. And we want to thank you as well for, like Tessia did, for being able to open up and be vulnerable and transparent with what it is that you're feeling. I knew both of you would be able to relate to the topic, both Tisha and Gail. And Tisha, I apologize if you've been bamboozled and hoodwinked into this. But as you can hear, it's been helpful to me, and I believe it's been helpful to others. So I thank you for sharing your experience.
Yeah, and I think what happens too, like Gail had 2 losses, one earlier and one later. And I think
Three.
3 losses.
She had the son in 2012. Then she had her mother and her sister back to back starting in
Right. Okay. I
2020.
apologize. Yes, because I remember mom, so sister too. Those are significant losses of people very close. And I think what happens sometimes is as time passes, people feel like, well, I should be over this by now, so I'm not going to talk about it. But you have to. You have to. And if you don't have a community of people that you can talk to that can support you, that can understand where you are, then that's where a therapist is necessary. But people tend to feel guilty because they push themselves and feel like, well, it's been 2 or 3 years and I still feel the loss, and I don't want to talk to anybody because they're not going to understand, or they might judge me for still feeling the loss. The loss is the loss, and everyone again grieves differently. And so, it is important to talk about it and get help with it, because that's part of the process of healing and dealing with it, is being able to give it words and give it meaning so that you can get those emotions out and start moving along with your healing process. But the one thing I'm going to say to everyone is, do not rush your process. Everyone grieves differently and everyone heals differently, and the time frame for everybody looks differently. And there's no, you should be over it by now. If you're not, then I say get support if it's been more than a year, but be gentle with yourself and patient with the process. It is a process, and that's what you have to remember. And your process is not going to look the same as your friends and family. So just be patient, be gentle, and give yourself some grace as you go through this process.
Follow on IG at Shirma PC and at INTL Players Juice, and support not only their efforts individually, but also just give them a shout out. Say what's up. Shirma PC, as you can see, or Shirma P Clark directly. As you can see, she's great at what she does. Also, International Players Juice. What it is she does all types of juices. She themes them after different hip hop and R&B, urban songs. She can tell you more about each of her different flavors and assortment of flavors, but she delivers cross country. Fresh juices. She's making some now. That's why she's been in and out of camera, because she is an entrepreneur by nature and by trade. So she's over there, as you saw the cucumber that she was threatening me with. That is because she's making juice right now. She wasn't really being violent towards me because I hoodwinked her. But I just want y'all all to go ahead and definitely follow both of them on Instagram, that is, and support their efforts. And I also want to say and give a big shout and my condolences to not only Tisha and your mom, and I know you're grieving still, but also to Gail Hilton, who also was very transparent. And I'm thanking you for sharing it with us. And I know that you're still grieving as well. And so my condolences to you both, and my prayers go out to you both. Speaking of which, Heavenly Father, we come to you today to give you the praise and honor that you so rightfully deserve. We thank you for all that you have done in our lives. We thank you for your spiritual guidance in however we accept and receive and understand your spirit. We thank you for continuing to guide us. We thank you for helping us with our grievance. I ask you tomorrow to give me the words to say, the things to do in order to get through the process of this funeral that I will be attending and organizing. And I ask that all those who are grieving for their loved ones right now, that you give them extra grace, extra strength, and extra time for their healing, and extra understanding for their healing as they go through the process. We thank you for these things. Forgive us for anything that we might have done against you. Forgive us if, in fact, we are doing things continuously. Help us change and help us have a better way. We say these things humbly in your Son, Jesus Christ's blessed name, or however those who I'm praying for may know and acknowledge you. Amen and amen.
Amen.
And our condolences to you, Sean B, as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And my mom said thank you as well. And our family, on behalf of our family, thank you. So with that being said, this has been a great Straight Wellness. This is at Shirma PC, Shirma Clark, licensed therapist. I have at International Players Juice, which is INTL Players Juice. Tessia, she is in the building. And at Sean Bolden, we have all been here today with you guys. We thank you for joining us. We thank you for sharing. I thank you both for sharing your time and your efforts. And I thank you, Lord, for allowing me to hoodwink all my great friends and share them with the world. All right. Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Y'all have a good night.